Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Michelle Kennedy, and I'm here with my guests, Baldwin Chiu and Larissa Lam. I am the founder, executive director, and producer of the Chicago Southside Film Festival. Our festival is a not-for-profit 501c3 arts and culture organization founded in 2117 with a two-part mission. The first part of our mission is to create opportunities for Southside filmmakers to screen their own work in their own communities. And the second part of our mission is to use film as a tool for collective intellectual engagement. We are here as promised for a live streamed filmmaker Q&A session with the awesome and dynamic and talented filmmakers and creators of Far East Deep South, the film that we streamed since 7 a.m. today on our streaming partner, Seed and Spark. We are here with, let me go ahead and reintroduce everybody. We're here with Larissa Lam, who is a director, writer, and producer of the film and wife of Baldwin Chiu. Baldwin is the husband of Larissa Lam, and he's the producer of the film and the son of the film's primary subject. I'm going to ask that everyone who's watching right now, looks like there are 12 people. If you're watching right now on Facebook and you have any comments or questions, go ahead and share those with us in the comments section. We will see them and we'll get to the ones that we're able to towards the end of our talk today. And if you're watching from YouTube, we can also see any comments that pop up in the comments field boxes. So if you have any questions, comments, you want to give them a shout out because the film is so awesome. If there's something personal that touched you about it, let us know and we'll do our best to incorporate your comments into our talk today. So let's go right into our questions. First of all, I hope that everybody had a chance to view the film, recently. I just looked at it maybe an hour and a half ago. So there's a lot of fresh things that I want to point out and ask you guys, but I'll go ahead and start with the questions that I shared with you all earlier. And I'm going to start with Larissa, but I know how it is when you're married and
we finish each other's sentences.
I know, right? So your brains merge and you're answering.
Just sticking it together, right brain, left brain.
You can stick your fingers together. So whoever, I'm going to throw this question at you, Larissa, but I respect, I respect whoever chooses to answer. It's going to be great to hear from both of you. So tell us about the decision to make the film. How did the two of you start? How did you come to the conclusion that you needed to make it, especially after finding Cleveland? And how did you start the process?
Well, there's a scene in the film Far East Deep South where we walk into a Chinese museum in the middle of Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of at that moment, the wheels started maybe turning a little bit because in my mind, I'm like, why is there a Chinese museum in the middle of Mississippi? Sure. And then, without spoiling everything, but we find a very important family artifact in that museum out of nowhere. And then there's just kind of a sequence of events that happen that are just remarkable. And I'm like, what is going on? And between the remarkable family discoveries and just the little known history of Chinese in the South, I mean, I took AP history. I was a very good student, and I'm like, how come I never read about, Asians being impacted by Jim Crow laws and segregation? I'm like, and I didn't even know there were a bunch of Chinese historically in the South. I mean, I knew they were there now, but I was like, wait, they go all the way back to the 1800s. And so I'm like, people need to know this history because at least for me, I struggled so much with my identity growing up about being Chinese American and am I Chinese, enough? Am I American enough? And I was kind of somewhere in between, and I was never treated, as one or the other. And so I was like, I would feel more American and feel like I belonged in this country a little bit more, if I knew that our history had deeper roots in different parts of the country and went further back than we realized.
Yeah, awesome. And if she was the stereotyped good Chinese wife that listens to her husband, then she would not have made this film because this guy right here said, hey, we're trying to figure out oops, hold on a second.
Okay, so what he was going to say, it's probably a political call because, it's that season right now, right? But, he was going to say that he basically told me, your job is to take care of our daughter. So get out of her way. We're on this family vacation. You just stay in the back of the van and you just take care of our daughter was only 15 months old at the time. I didn't know what was
it was basically she's crazy. Our little daughter's crazy. So somebody's got to
keep her
so that we can go do our thing and figure out You know,
it was their family trip. You know, my sister-in-law and in-law were just like hanging in the back. Like, if you've seen the movie, it's kind of fun to watch it another time.
Baldwin, got it, yeah.
You see us lurking in the background. We're just kind of like background actors in the whole thing.
Well, I'm glad that you are a little hard-headed and stubborn and that you got this incredible footage. Like, it's amazing. That is absolutely awesome. So how long in time was it between the trip for Finding Cleveland and the trip for this film? Like, how many years had passed?
We actually went back to Mississippi several times to capture interviews and talk to people, and so that period, so we probably spent another 3 years after Finding Cleveland, going back and finding more people. And
so it was a total of about 4.5 years.
Yeah,
for the whole process.
4.5 years. That was my next question. Okay.
Yeah,
that's great. That's awesome. So, aside from not being a good wife, what was like the most challenging part of making the film? Like, what was the hardest part?
You know, honestly, it was balancing all the different elements that we wanted to convey. I mean, there's the family story, the emotional discoveries, there's the historical aspect. We didn't want to make a boring, you know, historical documentary. No offense to historical documentaries. There's some very entertaining.
I get it. Yeah, they can be dry. They can be dry.
They can be dry, you know, and so we wanted to make it engaging. And then the idea that we had all these themes about being American and racial relations, and there's all these very, you know, again, it's very layered. And so that was the hardest part, was when we were sitting in the editing room, that there were so many themes we wanted to capture and not overwhelm the audience with. And so I hope we struck the right balance, and we hope we challenged people to think and you know, educated. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they'll still leave room for them to ask questions and go digging some more on their own about history.
No doubt, no doubt. So, so this is sort of like part 2. Like, this is the second documentary you've put together. This is the longest one of the 2. Is there going to be like a part 3 of this whole finding our roots down south meets north? Like, what's in your pipeline? Like, what should we expect from you guys for the 2021 festival?
Well, I don't know if we'll get it done that quickly, but for 2021, but we do have another side of Baldwin's family, and unbeknownst to, we were so focused on Baldwin's dad's side of the story that we ended up finding out his mom actually has a legacy in this country too that we didn't realize. I don't know if you want to share at all about that.
We just found out about a month ago that on my mom's side that we are actually descendants of railroad workers. So my mom's grandfather was actually a railroad worker here, and the documents we found was amazing, but it was kind of sad. It's a continuation of the story of the Chinese Exclusion Act and how it affected our families. Basically, he had to leave to go back to China, probably to find a wife and have a family, with full intention to coming back. He had legal papers, residency, to come back. And we found a letter from his lawyer saying, you're allowed to come back, but they won't let you. But they said you're allowed to come back, but they said, we can't get the immigration guys to let you in
because of the immigration ban and the restrictions at the time. Yeah.
So even though he was legally
he had the legal papers to do it, but because of all the crazy laws that were being
during the Chinese Exclusion Act, he got stuck.
So did he go back after like the train tracks were completed? Like, was it after the work was done that he tried to go and bring his wife back?
Yeah, I think it was like 1903 or 1904. He tried to go.
He was in Denver already. So that's a whole nother story. Wow, there's a bunch of Chinese people in an old Chinatown.
Different part of the country. So that's north or the Rocky Mountains.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I'd love to hear that story. I mean, we were fortunate to screen the Chinese Exclusion Act a couple years ago with the support of our friends over at the Chinese American Museum of Chicago.
Yeah, those did great.
Mabel is watching.
Yeah, shout out to our friends over there too.
Yeah, it was engrossing. Like, it was absolutely awe-inspiring. And we had a gentleman there whose father, this gentleman was in a wheelchair. He was very elderly, and he was telling us about how his father like worked and worked and worked and saved and was living in like this little town close to where the tracks came together. And then like once the tracks were done, the people in the town just like burned down where they were living and took all their stuff, and they lost everything. And this man was just like, people in my family, we're still afraid that people could come and take everything we have. And to hear that in 2018 was really startling. But that the Chinese Exclusion Act wasn't that long ago, right?
No.
And so the Transcontinental Railroad, the Golden Spike, that story is absolutely fascinating. And like you, Larissa, I thought I was a pretty good student. I took a lot of history, and I was just disappointed that, I was well into my 40s before I learned that story. And, had I not decided to get involved in film festivals, it's something that I would have never known. So, hats off to people like you and Baldwin who are taking time out of your lives to make sure that this history doesn't get lost. It's really incredible. So let's talk about other film festivals. What other festivals have you screened this film in? How has it been received on the festival circuit? What's your experience been with film festivals?
Well, we had a world premiere at CineQuest in March, and you guys, something happened. I don't know what happened around the world.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we get this text message, like, I think right before our first screening. It's like, so these screenings this weekend are the last ones we're going to have. We're going to cancel the rest of the festival. And we're like, okay.
We made the trip up north
to San Jose. And
San Jose, okay.
So we had no idea at that time that those first two screenings would be the last two screenings ever in a movie theater of Far East Deep South. And, we basically have only done two other virtual film festivals. So this, Chicago Southside would be our third. And the response was great. We did the Oxford Film Festival and the Women Texas Film Festival, both of which were had awards. And we won awards at both festivals. And so the response so far has been very, very positive. And we've just been, you never know when you make a film if it's going to resonate with people. And so I think
never
excited about is the fact that so many people have watched the film from all walks, all ethnic backgrounds, all ages. And the crazy thing is, with current news, our film has this strange place of being very relevant, even though it's historic, right? Asians were under attack for being blamed for coronavirus. We have, the whole Black Lives Matter movement, which isn't new, but has come back to the forefront. And one of the things that we were really wanted, and immigration, has been in the news. And so we didn't know all these things were all kind of converge and be amplified during this pandemic. And so we hope we can foster a positive conversation in terms of hopefully to make positive change, through discussions in the film
and through education, right?
Yeah, you just talk about timeliness, like you're never really quite sure where the world is going to be. As a film festival producer, you start officially soliciting for, submissions 6 months before the festival starts. So you have no idea where the world is going to be. But let me tell you, when the quarantine started in March, my team and especially my team and I, especially Lex Curtis, our assistant producer, we were on the edge of not having the festival. I have not seen Lex since January. Like I have not physically laid eyes on Lex. I think since maybe February. I think maybe I dropped something off at her house, like left it in a bag on the porch and was like, okay, I'll get back in the car. Don't come out, what have you. So to be quite honest, we honestly were like on the verge of not having the festival until August. Because I reached out to you all earlier in this year, and you didn't hear from us for a while because we literally were like, should we do it? Is it worth it? What platform should we use? But we felt like it was too important to not participate and to not share some of these films with the world. We had to, like, we're doing 6 screenings this year. That's down from 18 planned. Okay. So when we said,
we feel so honored.
And I'm not trying to gash her head up, but we were just like, what can we not cut? And we decided that this story was just too important. And it was that it was so deep and layered. And I'm happy that we made that decision, given, the fact that America's next vice president might be a woman who, identifies as both Black and Asian at the same time.
Blasian.
Our Blasian sister.
She's Blasian, she acknowledges and loves both worlds that she comes from. And, you know, honestly, I feel like before Barack Obama, for the most part, that narrative, that position would have been considered complex
Mm-hmm.
and you know, sort of like a cop out, because it's very forward thinking. It's very forward thinking. So, you know, I'm African American, right? You all are proud Chinese descent. Do you think that her approach to self identity can change the way that Black and Asian people in America relate to each other and spend time and occupy space with each other?
Yeah, and I think that was one of the main things that when we were making the film, I talked to Larissa and I was like, you know, I really want to get this. I really want our story to normalize who we are as Americans, not normalize who we are as Asian Americans or Chinese Americans or even Americans of Chinese descent, but just as normal Americans. And I think when we went back to Mississippi and really sought out the African American community and tried to get their opinions and their testimonials and to really talk to them, we really wanted to capture that sense of who we were back then, so that we could normalize the conversation today, that it's not that complex, it's not that like difficult to see us together. I mean, if we could see ourselves together in the past, then we should be able to see ourselves together in the future. And so I wanted that to be normalized in our film, so that these things to see Kamala and anybody in the future is normal. It's not like, oh, she's just a unicorn. You know? Right.
It's like it's just like we've been occupying space and living together for a really long time. I'm glad that you said that if we could see each other living together in the past, it'll help us now, because, you know, a lot of people of African American descent in Chicago, they are probably like third, maybe second generation, you know, children or grandchildren of people who migrated, frankly, from Mississippi. I'd say the majority of the kids that I grew up around here in Chicago, they spent their summers in Mississippi because that's where their grandparents were. And the idea was that, you know, the Great Migration was an attempt to get away from, you know, white oppression and segregation and, you know, all these awful things that happen. And I feel like that story of Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta, and a lot of the southern cities being multicultural melting pots, that's been lost to history. Like it's black, white. And the fact that, you know, you had all these people from China doing what they did, and then you had all these, you know, people from Cuba and the Caribbean in places like New Orleans and, you know, St. Louis, it's been lost. It really has been lost. So I think that, you know, with things like your film and, you know, Kamala's story will open people's eyes and say, okay, yeah, America's more than just black and white, and we're all here together. So let's get a little bit more comfortable. I know that your film has that potential. And so let's talk about what's going to happen with this film after our festival. What path is the film on? What other festivals do you have lined up? What's your ultimate home for this film?
World domination. No.
Granted. Yeah.
Which one's Pinky and which one's the brain? Okay,
right. Yeah. For those of you who are Animaniacs fans, yeah, very dates us. But, you know, so Chicago Southside Film Festival has the distinction of kicking off our fall festival virtual tour, because this is the first step of many steps that we're doing on the film festival circuit, because everybody's film festivals that were in spring got postponed to the fall. Yeah, and some of the fall ones are going too. And so we've got kind of double the plethora of films. So if people go to our website, fareastdeepsouth.com, they can find the list of screenings. I think our next one up is next, or we've got three. We have Asian American International Film Festival, which is
the New York Asian Film Festival.
Yeah, New York, the tri-state area, and then Newport Cinequest, which is where we world premiered. They're doing the back half of their film festival online now.
So we're back, so we're back at Cinequest, and now virtual.
October 1st through 14th, and then we're going to Newport Beach Film Festival to October 7th, 8th, and we just got a whole list of amazing film festivals that we're doing. I think it's hopefully going to present an opportunity, and then of course the education space is the most important to us. You know, as we were talking, a lot of people don't know this, And honestly, I think the way we can change the way people think about race and about what it means to be American really starts with like getting our kids young. It's great that we have discussions with adults on Zoom and and YouTube and Facebook, but we got to get them in the schools. And so I think we're about to make a major announcement with regarding education, but our plan is to try to get the film into as many schools and universities as possible, and really to not just get the film in there, but really help teachers add this aspect into the curriculum. We all already teach segregation in the American South in our regular U.S. history classes. All we need to and the Chinese were there, and the Mexicans, and they were also impacted by Jim Crow laws, so that people know, like you were mentioning, it wasn't just a binary issue. It really affected a whole host of other people. So, and we're working on some things for next year as well. But we have a lot of plans. As many people as possible, we want to see the film, and hopefully we can literally change the way history is taught.
You can, I'm telling you, and I don't know what your political persuasion is, but if Kamala, is in that White House, it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for people telling stories like yours. We got to get into the schools. I am a big fan of documentary as storytelling, documentary films as supplements, to books and what have you, because these kids are on these computers and tablets every day. So I wish you the best of luck with that. It's very important. It's something that, it's American history, so we should all be learning it. So let me shift over to you, Baldwin, because I kind of want to get into some of the more personal, like personal and family dynamics of the film. Let's talk about your father.
Oh, I think he might be watching.
I hope so. And hello, Mr. Chiu. It's nice to meet you. I hope I can meet you if you ever come to Chicago. But let's talk about this film and your relationship with your father. Did it change your relationship with your father, or the way that you see your father after watching, him relive this part of his family history?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly opened up my eyes more. I think, when I was growing up, I didn't think much about how my father didn't have a father. So whatever he did as a father was just my dad being a dad. But then after this all happened, there's certainly generational, things between us that were like, oh, are you the American one, or am I the American one? Well, you're here in America, so you're American. Well, I was born in America and you weren't. So who's American and who's Chinese and who's not? And so I think those things kind of confuse things a little bit. But I think after this whole thing happened, it was more of it's not about whether or not you're Chinese enough or American enough. It's really about our family and what happened to our family, and being able to talk through those generational dynamics. And I think that's opened up conversation about like, well, why do I like this stuff more? And then it allows the younger generation to be like, oh, now I understand why my dad felt this way. I understand that he didn't have a father, so he was doing the best that he could under those circumstances. And then just learning the history. I don't think my dad ever understood the history of what went on. So most of his life, he just thought that his father abandoned him for the riches of America, to come to the mountain of gold and leave your family behind and let them struggle while you have a great life in America and not struggle at all because everyone in America is prosperous.
Is rich. Yeah.
Right? Yep. So, and that wasn't it, right? And we find out.
That's a common kind of immigrant kind of thing. Yeah, that's a common immigrant family thing.
And then for all of us to discover together about the Chinese Exclusion Law and the Exclusion Act and how it had consequences that affected our family, it changed, I think, how my family interpreted why we were separated for generations. And I think
because it wasn't necessarily a choice, it was circumstances beyond their control.
Yeah. So it doesn't bring back the fact that my dad had no father for his entire life, but I think it brings a little bit of closure to understanding why that happened, and for him to know that the future doesn't have to not know. My daughter can now be part of that future generation that knows what happened and what not to allow to happen again in the future.
Yeah, how to be diligent and how to be an involved citizen and make sure that these laws don't shift around. And we can't afford any more exclusion acts.
Yeah, and that's been threatened in recent years.
Like it's real. So now let's talk about your father, and I don't know, like the rest of the family, the people in your father's family, are you in contact with your family members in China? Like, do you all communicate with, your grandfather's brothers and sisters, children and grandchildren? Like, what does that relationship look like?
Yeah, we don't really know too many of my father's side of the family. And it's just because we've lost touch. And I mean, there were obviously dynamics when they were growing up to where some of them got left behind. So when that happens and you don't know the reason why, then there's going to be some rift in the family relationships. And of course, everyone's older now, so not everyone's there.
Sure.
So unfortunately, we don't keep too much contact. We don't know too much of the contact back in China.
Okay. So now you and your brother represent, I'm guessing, the third post-immigration generation, right? It was like, so you're
yeah. We're open to spoilers right now. We're assuming everyone has seen the film.
That's what we talked. Like, I mean, because it stopped streaming at 7, right?
There you go.
So,
okay.
Well, yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, one, two.
But you should watch it October 1st and the other festival.
That's right. I guess we would be fifth generation then, right?
Yeah, okay. It's complicated because they had to go back and forth,
sure.
So we trace, it would be what we discovered through the film, right, is his great grandparents came to the country first.
Most likely,
which goes 5 generations back.
So we like to say I would be the 5th generation in America because
living in America. Yeah.
And my daughter would be the 6th generation in America. But that didn't. But because of the Exclusion Act, not all of us were born here, right? My dad was not born here. My grandfather was not born here.
Right. Yeah, it complicates things. So let me ask you, when you were in Mississippi, because I know there's that wonderful scene of you all, I guess, in the hotel lobby, sort of like talking to the people who would have remembered, your grandfather and your great grandfather, and they sort of represented, a couple of generations back. Did you interact with any people who were still in Mississippi who were like 4th or 5th generation, like yourself? How many people stuck around? You know what I'm saying? Like, who's still there versus who left and moved to the coast? You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
How many people stayed behind? How many people are still in that part of the Mississippi Delta?
Well, there's definitely a lot less, but then we did meet a few who took on the family farm business. So like there's some of them there that are
grocery stores.
Okay.
But most have left. Some of them came back, like Gilroy, who's in our film. Gilroy Chow, he left. He went to New York, and then now he moved back to Clarksdale specifically because him and his wife wanted to be back in the community that they grew up in and give back, especially to the Black community. So, and he was I think he was a NASA engineer
that worked on a bunch of NASA projects, and
he was in Florida. An article about him in the New York Times a few years ago?
Yes. He's been featured on PBS and NPR too. And then there are not as many in numbers, but I mean, in general, Mississippi, a lot of people have migrated out because of the economy. And so now you see like some newer immigrants. Or some businesses, but the generational ones, we did meet a few, like Gabriella saying, who we met. There are a few that are still around.
Okay.
So it's interesting to hear their perspective because they stayed there and they kind of grew up with all these stories and they never thought it was a big deal. Like for us, we're like, what? This is amazing.
Sure.
You gotta think about it. Yeah, but you got to think about their parents and what did the parents want that was best for their children. Did they want them to continue? Like, oh yeah, it's hard here. We're running a grocery store and it's, we have to deal with segregation and all that stuff. And so we hope that you'll just stay here and take over the store and do the same thing, right? They're not going to say that. They're saying, whatever you can.
Yes.
Get an education. We hope to finally go to white schools and learn.
Yeah, I mean that was a dynamic here in Chicago. You had the children of the people who survived the Great Migration. They were just not like, we're just gonna come up here and work and save to go back to Mississippi. It was just like, we're here. That's the past. Cut ties. Don't go back. Right. And so, what we see up here is that when people, that 2nd or 3rd generation of the people who came up from the South, when they go back to the South, they're going for like a big job in Atlanta, or, you know, to go to Morehouse or maybe FAMU or something. So they're going, you know, for educational, or, you know, a lot of people go to Houston for jobs. So it's, it's a different mindset in this.
Well, we actually have someone in our film that is from Pace, Mississippi, you know, which we featured in a film, and she lives in Chicago now, but we happened to interview her when she was back visiting family in Mississippi. So
yeah, there are a lot. I mean, there are a lot. So
Cheyenne, if you're there, she's in our film.
I mean, it's just, you know, when you grow up Black in Chicago, you learn a lot about Mississippi, even if you don't have family roots there. People assume that your family's from Mississippi unless you tell them otherwise, and it's just like. It's like, I've never been to Mississippi. What? You know, and so it's interesting to see, you know, a story about Mississippi from a different perspective.
Well, that's why it's important for the museum to be around, right?
Yeah, it is. And like, we're so blessed that they support us. And it may seem a little unusual to people that, you know, you have this primarily Black film festival spending so much time in Chinatown, but I'm just like, Chinatown is on the South Side. You know, the story is more complicated than, you know, what's in the popular media. So I recognize, you know, the relationships. So based on your time spent in Mississippi, did you witness a greater degree of social integration and interaction between like the you know, the third and fourth generation descendants of the Chinese migrants and, you know, whites and Latino and Black people in the Delta? Like, has that dynamic shifted?
Yeah, I mean, what we saw, at least in the Delta area, I can't speak for the rest of, you know, Mississippi, you know, everybody, well, you know, there are a lot of small towns. So like everybody does kind of know each other, and, you know, you go around and people were fairly like friendly to each other, at least the ones that we encounter. Now, I know it's not like that everywhere, and we don't know what people say behind closed doors, but there was a lot more integration in terms of that. Now, just like everywhere, there's certain cities that are predominantly Black, certain areas that are predominantly white, or, you know, but, you know, it's not to the extent that we even see in major cities like New York, even LA, where, you know, you do have very, very pocketed, like self-segregated suburbs in a sense, you know, but it's, I mean, there's definitely Black neighborhoods in the South, and there's white neighborhoods in the South. Yeah. And there's some
the
that
Chinese are just kind of sprinkled.
And the Chinese are sprinkled all over.
Because there's still fewer of us there.
Yeah, like there's no Chinese neighborhood, you know, unlike
there's no Chinatown.
Like in Chicago, you'll find, you know, certain Naperville or, you know, other places where you find.
But what about like, did you guys go to like Jackson, Mississippi? Is there like a
Chinatown? We did not.
No, okay.
No, we have not been there.
Yeah, so we can't speak to that. Mainly the Delta area is where we focused on, and you know, we heard again, it's a much more of a melting pot in that area than other parts of Mississippi.
Plus, like, you know, you have the university there, so Delta State University is right Oxford, there, right by, you know. And,
or I'm sorry, that's in Cleveland, and then there's Ole Miss in Oxford. And
so when you get closer to the university, it's a little more diverse in that setting, in that area. Once you get around there.
So now that you guys mentioned Delta State University, I have a trivia question, and I'm gonna see how much you were paying attention to Delta State University and the local culture there. What is the mascot of Delta State University?
The Fighting Okra. Wait, no, there's two. There's two, and the Statesman. It's a trick question. There's a Statesman and the Fighting Okra.
Like when you heard when the first time you heard the Fighting Okra, like, did you just feel like you were in a different planet? You were like, what is the Fighting Okra, and what are you talking about?
Do
I deep fry you and eat you? Like, what do I do with you?
But you have to understand, we're from California, right? And we've had some weird mascots at some of our universities. I think Santa Cruz is a banana slug, and his brother went to UC Irvine, and that's an anteater. So, and there's like a wave. UC San Diego is like a wave.
But I don't. This might be the first vegetable though that.
Stanford's like it's like a tree, or the
I've never been, and I'm not going to go into detail about how I know that one of the mascots of Delta State University is the Fighting Okra, but it's so amusing to me. And when I saw like you were on campus in the movie, I was just like, I wonder if they sneak that in as a joke just to make fun.
It is. I specifically got my shot of the Fighting Okra. I had to. I was like, this is too hilarious not to put in the movie. Maybe
somebody needs to do a documentary film about why the bloody mascot is a Fighting Okra anyway. That's like
maybe that's our next film.
Could be.
So let me ask you a question, and like, if I'm giving away too much, to people who might not have seen it, or disincentivizing them
It'll force
from
them to
seeing
see
it
it.
again. Let's talk about that Bible. Just
Mhm.
give us a couple of sentences about how you all found that Bible, and just like the energy in the room when you opened it up and realized who it was from, like the woman, the process behind the woman that said, wait, chew. Let me go. Like, talk to us about how that scene happened. Set it up.
Yeah, well, I mean, this really comes down to like miraculous timing. You can say it's a godsend. You can say it's, only God could have put this timing there, because originally we had talked about a little bit. We didn't really say that we originally were going to show up in Mississippi the year earlier, but because she had
I was
a baby,
pregnant.
we delayed the trip 1 year.
Okay.
If we went the year before, that Bible would not have been there because it was just recently donated. So when we showed up, Emily was like, "Oh, Casey Liu."
She's the curator of the museum.
She's the curator of the museum. She was like, "Casey Liu, that name's really familiar. I wonder why." And then as we were talking, it clicked in her mind, and that's why she led us. She goes, "Let's go to this room. I think I have something."
Because it was not on display. Like, it was not like the Casey Liu Bible.
It was
like,
just started cataloging all that.
She just started, and she goes like, "Yeah, I have to search. I go look through every single thing that goes through this museum, so I see everything. And this is just in the back room because it's not out on display yet." And she didn't know anything about it, and that's when we all basically rediscovered that moment together. When she went through a couple boxes before she found that box, and when so she was looking for it. And we didn't know what she was looking for.
Yeah, she didn't tell us what it was. Like, kind of like you see in the film.
That was the moment.
Edwin says, like, she says she might have something. Maybe she didn't want to get her hopes up in case she remembered wrong or something.
Like it's the wrong name.
And then there'd be no movie if we didn't find that. But it was pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Okay, so where's the Bible now?
It's still at the museum. So
it's on loan at the museum.
They gave it back to us. So we have ownership of it. The family that found it was the Dunn family, actually. And so they returned it back to us, and that was very kind of them. We were very thankful for that. And we, in turn, my dad actually said, what am I going to do with this? There's obviously some memories there and it's probably would be hard for him to keep it at home and look at it. And he was like, this Bible would actually be safer if it stayed at the museum. So as soon as we received it, we went back to Emily and said, like,
it's on loan at the museum.
Yeah. So they have it on loan.
Yeah, we're hoping. Eventually we had these. We can do a tour, but we had these great plans. In the normal world, that we would be doing this museum tour, maybe even with the Bible, across the country and doing exhibits to promote the film.
Powerful. Like, just materially, it's a very powerful symbol of the trip, and just the spirit of what you all are doing. So I hope
it represents hope, right?
Yeah. It was remarkable. So tell me, so you said the Dunn family found it. Who's the Dunn family, and where'd they find it? Like,
so the Dunn family is the Dunn family is the family that took over the store. So when
they bought the store
from my grandfather. So when he passed away, my great grandmother couldn't run the store by herself. So she left and she sold the store, and she sold it to the Dunn family.
And their father, J.W. Dunn, was a very good friend of his grandfather, Casey Liu, we came to find out. And so their father was very sentimental. So you see scrapbooks that they pulled out in our film, and all of that. He kept all those other artifacts. There's a significant letter that is in the film too that we find, and stationery from the store. He kept everything from his close friends, the obituary. And so that's one of the items, the Bible, that he had kept. Yeah. He passed away, his family was just kind of getting rid of stuff and donated it. That's why donated to the museum, which is why the Bible ended up at the museum.
We were very fortunate to become friends.
Yeah, they didn't chuck it and throw it in the trash can, but they actually found value in it.
People do, and that's what people do every day. I hate to say it, but if someone older passes away, or they leave their home, they move out of their home, 9 times out of 10. A Bible, there might be a second thought before you throw something as spiritual.
Right.
Bible. But clothes, shoes, letters, that's just right into the dumpster. So it's wonderful. The telegrams, the letters, the Bible. It was really it was a moment in the movie where you just got quiet. It made you just be quiet and just be reflective and think that's such a wonderful sign. So I hope that Bible goes on display. I hope that you all can put it in the
Yeah.
Smithsonian. I hope there's like a Smithsonian exhibit on the
Yeah.
Chinese.
Yeah.
Well, we
we
actually talked to the Bible Museum in DC. We had talked to them about it, so we will,
and even
probably,
possibly Smithsonian, because I was part of the History Film Forum at the Smithsonian, and so we'd love to curate some type of exhibit to go along with the screening when everything opens up again in a post-pandemic world. But we'll see.
Yeah, we're all trying to figure out, just get through every day, and then figure out what the world will look like when this is all over with. But I'm a fan of the Smithsonian. I know some people, archivists involved in that big African American, history and culture museum right there on the museum campus. So your film and that Bible, those are the type of, precious things that America,
wouldn't that be great?
And people all over the world, they need to come and hear this story and see the mementos and everything. So, as I stated earlier, we are the Chicago Southside Film Festival. I'm a Black woman. I founded the festival. Our assistant producer, we used to have a team of millions. Now there's just 3 of us. We're all African American women of various backgrounds, African American, Caribbean, what have you. But we, the Southside does have very deep ties to Mississippi. Do you think this film speaks to their family histories and experiences? Like, what do you think someone, an African American person who's like the granddaughter of people who came up from Mississippi, what do you think they could get personally from this film? What speaks to them?
Yeah, I would like for them to see that we have shared history. That knowing that, like I said, knowing that we had something together in the past can and should lead to us having something together in the future and today. And I think I would hope that people, when they see it, they'll be like, oh, your people went through that too. Maybe we can relate a little bit more rather than focusing so much. I think so many times it's easier to focus on our differences, and we just make assumptions. Because you're not Chinese, then you won't understand this, right?
Or that you wouldn't be interested.
Right.
Yeah, and I think also there's such rich history beyond just the segregation and slavery narrative, and the grocery stores. Even though it was a difficult time, and they were forced to kind of live in community together, but there were some beautiful relationships. Maybe they weren't, always hanging out. I mean, some people, we heard stories. There's a scene in our film where we talked about, one of the older gentlemen was talking about, like, when they went to the movie theaters, sometimes the Chinese would also sit in the balcony with them in the colored section, right?
Yeah.
And or we hear these other stories from people, like, they'd be hanging out with their friends and they're Black and Chinese together, and it was very normal, and so I think there's so much rich history that goes beyond what we see in the news, what we see on TV and film, and it's nice to ask those questions, because I mean, sometimes I think even the people that are from that area may think, oh, I know everything about my family, or maybe they don't. They haven't asked their grandmother, like, oh, what else was going on besides what was going on with the Black side of the story, but like, what other people did you interact with?
But for present day, I think what I would like to see the most is that not just our 2 communities, but everybody, to stop being so afraid to ask questions, to get to know each other, to think that, to not feel like it's taboo to ask somebody because you don't know about something about their past or about their culture, or about their how they live and where they came from, and to be able to honestly build relationships. Because I know a lot of younger, or a lot of Asian Americans are trying to figure out, how do we get on the side, and so they're trying to, like, understand what Black Lives Matter is, or they're trying to understand what social injustice is.
And it's good that people are researching it and doing the work to understand that history, but it's real life relationships too, beyond just like reading a textbook, right? Like, I think I know everything about Black history now. Like,
right, okay, because we did it for 2 weeks in AP American history. Like, a lot of people,
exactly.
That's all they're outside of the people that they know.
You got my point.
It. That is what you know. That is what you know. When we did the panel with Mabel at the Chinese American Museum, there were some very difficult and politically incorrect comments from some people that, you know, you could take as offensive, especially sort of older people. You know, there's not that much of a filter, and so Mabel, you know, one guy asked Mabel, was just like, you know, what are all these Black people doing in here? And you know, and then there was another person that was like, you know, well, you know, I really, unless I'm in a store buying something or in a restaurant, I really don't interact with Chinese people. And so there's just like, and
Yeah.
you know, the reality is that there is this, there's a gulf. You know, there's a gulf.
Yeah.
Even on the south side of Chicago. I mean, Chinatown is like on 26th Street. It goes like from 26th to 35th. And like literally you cross a 8-lane expressway and you're in Bronzeville, you know, which is like at the heart of African American history and culture. And there's not a lot of reaching across that highway for people to get to know each other beyond a transaction, or beyond, you know, maybe you work with some Black people at your job, but there might have been one Chinese kid in your class in high school, literally. So there's a lot of work to be done. Do you think your film can open doors between the two communities?
Yeah, I definitely have that hope. I mean, I would love to. I mean, we had a lot of Chinese American and Asian American churches open up our previous film, Finding Cleveland, to the public. And what we would love Far East Deep South to do is we would love to get into the African American churches and be like, you know, we might have a following that's in the Asian American community. If they're gonna watch our film, let's make them come to you, and let's do this together. And if we're going to other churches or other organizations or community groups, let's invite everyone to come, and not just, you know, that predominant
the people that you
community,
know.
right?
Like the people that you know,
Yeah, and I mean, I think in light of what's going on too in the world, and you know, this quest for racial, you know, equity, you know, a lot of people of Asian descent, especially newer immigrants, they may not understand the Black experience because they didn't, you know, study it in history, or even if they are American and studied in U.S. history, they studied it for, you know, one exam, and then they forgot about it, but because they didn't feel a personal connection. And that's what we've heard from so many people, and especially teachers who teach in multi-ethnic schools. They're like, yeah, our Asian kids check out when they get to like slavery and segregation, because they don't think it affects them. But now it did. It did. We just didn't know about it, and vice versa. I think there's this misperception that people have, you know, not just from the Black community, but from other people that are not Asian, that, oh, they're all just a bunch of smart math people, and you know, they do really well. They don't really understand what it means to be oppressed and to have discrimination. And then kind of seeing it's like, well, you know, we just never knew about it or talked about it, but like we've had over 100 years, you know, of discrimination as well, and it's a shared experience. Not that we should dwell on that, but the fact that I think we can.
That's not the totality of it. Yeah, obviously that's not the totality of it, but it's a beautiful thing to be able to step back and say, oh wow, you know, the greater context of all of this is fascinating. And okay, so now I understand some things that were going on, you know, with people close to me. It's your film is a gift.
Yeah, I would love it. I would love it if people didn't look at us, you know, you or me, as a group of people to study. I would rather it be, we are a group of people to get to know, right? And like you said, like you study Black history in February, the shortest month of the year, and then
APA History Month.
But like honestly, so that was a concession. Like, you know, thankfully we had Carter G. Woodson, who was able to have some national influence. It's a wonderful thing. You know what I'm saying? It's not the longest month, but but I feel like it served not only Black Americans, but Americans well, because otherwise I would be lost in time. But I mean, where would the average Black person in America have the opportunity to learn anything about the Chinese American experience?
I mean, they have to wait till May when school's out, because May is Asian American History Month, right?
Yeah, but then that's Asian American, and it's not just Chinese. You know, it's Korean, Japanese, and we have such a diverse group that are kind of lumped in one month as well. And you know, it's like we said with our film, we don't think of it as just a Chinese story or even an Asian story, right? It's really an American story.
Right.
Just like we hope that our community looks at an African American story or a Black story. It's not just for them, it's like, it's an American story,
Story.
you know, or it's a human story, because
Right.
sometimes it's not restricted to just this country.
And why just study it during that 1 month? But why not understand it throughout the year and then develop relationships and friendships so that you're not studying a Black person, you're a friend with a Black person, you're having bread with them.
It humanizes a group of people that you don't know. So let's talk, you know, let's put America to the side, you know, whatever. America, you know, look, I'm throwing the American history paper behind me. Have you considered, I'm being a little literal, have you considered screening this film outside of the United States?
We have. We've discovered that the Asian diaspora story rings true in a lot of countries. We don't know how it's going to play in certain territories, but like in Canada, for instance, they had exclusion laws too, because they kind of followed suit with America. And there's also identity issues with the Chinese that are, again, descended from immigrants that came there. They wrestle with are they Canadian? Are they, you know, are they Asian? Same thing with the UK or Australia and other places. And so I hope that our film can travel the borders, but we're focusing right now on America, but we hope to expand beyond that.
We certainly hope that.
Go ahead.
Sorry, we certainly hope that. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, we certainly hope that, you know, like maybe in the future we could reach out to China so that they can understand, because I think a lot of the newer immigrants don't understand our history here in America, and so when they come in here without the context of the history laid before them, that makes it so easy for them to come over today. There are certain things that they take advantage of without understanding how they can have those advantages. So we definitely want the Asian community, the Asian churches, not church, the countries, the Asian countries, to be able to understand, you know, this part of history, and to know that their history is not just in their country, but their history is here too.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the next part of my question. It's just like, how do you think this film would be received? You know, I don't want you to speak for everybody, the billion plus people in China. Tell me, what do Chinese people think? But just like, try to imagine, you know, being invited to, you know, a Chinese film festival in China to screen this film in 2021. How would that feel?
We hope that we have screened it for a few people that are Chinese nationals. In fact, there was talk at one point trying to bring our film over to a museum over there. And I think what I've heard is in the last few years in mainland China, there's been this movement to kind of rediscover the history of the diaspora, because the communist government had squashed that history for so long. And it was all about like just their country. And now they're trying to reclaim some of that history and some of like the progress that was made around the world. And I think, you know, it's really the human story. I think that's the part that has resonated the most, you know, regardless. And so hopefully that translates regardless of the culture. But, you know, we understand I think the identity, that might be a part that might be eye-opening for them, is just the wrestling with identity. Because certainly when we've traveled over to Asia, I have not felt like Asian enough. You know, I am kind of we are kind of looked down upon.
Like an American wherever you go.
Yeah,
we're not American, but we're not Asian. We're not Chinese. We're not white,
so we're kind of looked down upon a little bit over there because we're not native to there, and so then we're kind of looked down upon here a little bit because we're perceived to be foreign or not completely American. And so it's this interesting space that we've had to wrestle with, and you know, hopefully a little bit of that was conveyed in the film. And you know, again, I don't know if I have any answers of how we change the mentality over there, but the fact is there is a hierarchy, you know, in Asia of how they view those of us that weren't born there.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, I thought about. It's just like, you know, what would, you know, an audience of people who have lived in China their whole lives think about, you know, if they saw this and really if they don't know the difference between, you know, the North and the South in America, and it's all, you know, it's all the same to them. Well, how would that be received? That would be, you know, I might fly over with you guys. And
we're working on a Chinese subtitle.
I'm going to sign on as like a junior assistant.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because, you know, that things like that are absolutely fascinating to me. So, you know, we've got about 6 minutes left. I've gone through my list of questions. You all have been so gracious. Do you have any questions for us, or like, is there anything I've missed? What how do you feel about, this conversation that we've had?
I think it's been great. I mean, I think one thing I wanted to make sure that we pointed out as we're talking about the relationship between the Black and the Asian community is like, we also don't want this to be like diminishing anybody's story, because it's not as one of our friends, it's not the oppression Olympics. I think that's an important thing, that we've all had struggles, and, who had it worse. I mean, you can make a point like slavery was worse than certain, things, but at the same time, I think, immigrants coming in today, they're coming from war-torn countries. They're coming from communism. They're coming from other traumas. And so we have to acknowledge that
the commonality,
the commonalities and the struggles, and hopefully that it brings us together so that we can, overcome some of these systems and overcome some of these injustices or traumas that we've experienced in our life to really, again, make a better tomorrow, to sound very like Pollyanna-ish, We're
not Pollyanna-ish. One of our missions for the festival is, to use film as a tool for collective, intellectual engagement. Like, we want people, we feel that, I've been told by a lot of filmmakers, that we're in the golden age of documentary films, because they're so accessible. They're on these streaming channels. Everybody's got cable TV now for the most part. I remember when I was growing up, I was lucky that I had parents that exposed me, that would take me to film festivals, surprise, surprise, that would take me to the Fine Arts Theater, that would take me to University of Chicago or Northwestern to see a movie, some obscure documentary that, I really wasn't paying attention to, but I might have picked up something, that helped me in AP history or something, whatever. But the fact that you've got so many really good documentaries on Netflix, on Hulu, on PBS, Showtime has its own little documentary, group now that's showing some really, really, really interesting things. So, the world is a better place for it, I think. And so the fact that you all are cranking out these high quality, awesome documentaries, it's good timing for everybody. I'm glad that, your film is not relegated to the art house film circuit, to be quite honest, which a lot of documentary films kind of got ghettoized in, I think, before the streaming services.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an interest for it, and it's kind of sort of cool to watch documentaries now. And I think the other thing is what we would be able to blah 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 blah. Okay, let me try that again.
Okay.
Yes, I've been a talk show host, but you can't tell right now. But what the one thing is, I think we've been able to do is just even expand the conversation beyond the documentary. I mean, we're glad for forums like this. We've started to do monthly free webinars where we kind of dive into a topic. We just did one last week called Growing Up Southern, where we interviewed a couple of the Southern Chinese in our film. And, we dove deeper into that. We've also been able to do a podcast where we're able to share more about the stuff that we discovered outside of our film, because we want to share that knowledge with other people. And, really, this was just the beginning for us. Like, we don't end the discovery and sharing the education and knowledge at our film. We want to tell other people's stories as well and share them, beyond what people see in the film.
Okay, that's great. Baldwin, any last words, thoughts, advice from you? We got to wrap it up in like a minute.
Tell them where they can watch our film.
Yeah, tell them where, seriously, let us know again where we can watch it.
And if you missed it at this wonderful festival right here, you can go to fareastdeepsouth.com, and we have a list of upcoming screenings at all the upcoming film festivals, and you can join us. You can sign on up there to get updates on when the next events.
Yeah, you can subscribe to our newsletter, so we can give you announcements on some of those upcoming film festivals, but also other events like we mentioned, some of the workshops we're doing and podcasts.
But something I would love everyone to be able to do on your own, whether you watch our film or not. Hopefully you do, but it's really just talk to your family, talk to people as old as you can find, and then talk to people as young as you can find to ask them about their stories and find out where they're from, how they got there, and just get a better understanding. And don't worry about where they came from or what they look like or whatever. Just feel free to just ask people and learn about your history.
Yeah, and help us get the film into schools and change the curriculum.
Okay, well, listen, we are all about that. You know, our film festival ends next weekend, but Lex and I are we try to stay very engaged. So I hope that you will keep us, you all send these wonderful information packed emails. I hope to keep getting them.
Just don't unsubscribe from us. Don't unsubscribe.
I won't, because I'm absolutely fascinated by what you're doing. I feel like we were blessed to have your film in our festival, and I look forward to what you guys are creating in the future. Even if it's not ready, for our 2021 festival, we can always do a one-off or pop-up screening. You can pull us into a podcast, whatever you want to do. But I definitely want to keep in touch and keep this energy going. I really enjoyed it. We've got we've got a ticker at the bottom, Far East Deep South.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Where our viewers can go and find information, including directions and dates and times for your future screenings. I want to thank both of you for joining us. Thank you for making your film available to our audience, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know that you are both parents of a little girl like mine. I know my husband's downstairs with my daughter. I don't know where your daughter is. It's not my business, but thank you for taking.
She's watching way too much TV, probably.
She rambled right in here, and I think she tried to jump in, and then I just kind of like moved my hand.
I think she went to get a snack, so it's almost dinner time for us. So.
I'll let you all get back to parenting. Thank you. It's been wonderful, and I wish you all the best of luck with your film and your future film.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.